Okay, so if you're watching me now on YouTube, I am here on Zoom with the members
My
of.
friend ordered this gel polish and changed.
I need to turn that off. There we go. I'm here on Zoom with members of the rug cooking journey, and we are waiting for the clock to run out. There's about 3 minutes left before we go live at 4 o'clock. And I have a little baby lesson planned. Diana is here with me in Zoom, and she has a question um, about steaming and finishing. Okay, there's my other cameras. Okay, I'm like, where are my Zoom people? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and get started then around 4 o'clock, which is about 2 more minutes. So my goal is I always arrive in Zoom early, usually about 15 minutes before. Today I was going down a rabbit hole on YouTube and didn't quite make it that early, but it was close. And then once we got, oh wait, let me get my camera fixed. Where's all my buttons? Well, that ain't gonna work. I'll do it manually. There we go. And then we will answer your questions. So if you've got questions, whether you're here on Zoom or if you are watching on YouTube, because the first Tuesday of the month, I open this up to YouTube for the beginning of it. What we'll do is at some point we'll shut off YouTube, and then I'll go back to just Zoom only, and I'll finish it up with just my members. So that's how that's going to work today. I'm missing one window. I need to see the comments window, or this is not going to work. Okay, so which screen is it showing in? Because it didn't come up. Okay, oh, there it is. Okay, so I've got all the comments. So if you put in a comment on Zoom, you put a comment in YouTube. I don't think this is going to Facebook today. Kind of depends on my internet connection, and unfortunately, I have a crappy internet. I live in the country, but it's a glorious time of year to live in the country. So I get to see all the little green sprouts and watch farmers get ready. I'm going to mute a couple of people. There we go. Keep your camera muted for the beginning. And then once we get into Q&A, then feel free to unmute if you're here on Zoom. Of course, if you're on YouTube, I can't hear you. But if you're here on Zoom, unmute as needed, but keep it muted during the beginning. You'll save me tons of time trying to isolate the video to get the noises out of the recording. So I've got to lower my standards on editing, I think, because I'm trying too hard to make it sound really good. But this will help to keep things cleared up a little bit. Okay, so I have straight up 4 o'clock. So this past week, I've been dyeing a lot of window wool. I was out of stock. It did not feel good. It took me forever to find the time in my schedule to dye the window wool and then get it ripped apart and labeled and out in the mail. And I don't want to do that again. So normally it's one of those things where if I get down to like 10 or 12 bundles of wool, I'll dye more. Well, what hit me was a bunch of orders. Sometimes people were ordering 4 or 5 of the window wool bundles, and it just depleted my stock so fast that I was at 0 and had more orders coming in, and I should have lots of window wool for a while. The problem is when you dye it, it doesn't always come out perfect. Now, if you're a dyer, you know what I mean, right? The tiniest little mistake. For instance, it's over here. This piece of wool will not go in a window bundle packet because it's way too blue. I don't know what happened. Did I not measure the orange right? Did I over measure the blue? I don't know. But that's not the color it's supposed to be. It's a gorgeous color. It's really lovely, but it's not the right color. So that's part of the problem with dyeing. I always caution new beginners, be careful about your motives for going into dyeing. If you just like to play in the dye pot, because quite frankly, it's a lot of fun, right? But you're not really going to save money because you have to buy all your own mistakes, right? It's easier just to buy it, get it perfect, or not necessarily easier, it's more economical to buy it and get it perfect and not overbuy. So this is a piece of wool that will not go in a window bundle, but it's still good wool and it's still beautiful. So it's going to go on my shelf. But the problem is I dye half yard pieces. So this is a half yard. It was 36 inches long this way before it got dyed and washed, and so it shrunk some. But the question becomes, I have it notched now, and I do recommend that you notch all your wool so that you know you make the decision once, and then you know which way to rip it each time, right? So unless there's a reason for ripping it another way because it's a plaid and the colors go different this way than it does this way, usually you're going to rip it parallel to the selvage, right? And this is a selvage. But the selvage is not on the piece. So when it comes out of the dryer, that's when I do the snipping. So what do you do when you got a piece that's like this? It's almost square. I just hang on to a corner. I let everything drop. And then I look for the two corners. And the one that's short, and notice how much it's short by. It's not much. But the one that's short, that's the one that gets the notches. I fold it in half, fold it in half, fold it in half, and then do the snipping there. And then I have a perfect 1/16 of a yard at each rip. Okay, so I thought I'd show you that tip in case you get a piece of wool, or you buy like a half yard of wool. For me, I sell my half yards like this so that you get 36-inch long strips rather than 18-inch long strips, right? So if you're hooking wide cut, something this long is too short, right? So I like it to be nice and long, so this way you'll cut that whole length, and that works out best. So I thought I'd show you that today, since today is a question and answer question. And again, if you've got a question and you're on YouTube, go ahead and ask the question in the chat. I will be circling back around to you. Right now, I have a question with Diana. And for those of you in the Zoom room, if you want to ask your question next, go ahead and raise your hand. There's a digital raise your hand. It's depends on your device. So on a computer, it's down at the bottom. It'll say raise hand. Depending on the age of your Zoom app, it could be under reactions, and you'll find it there. So look for that if you've got a question. If I get to the point where I'm asking for questions and you're on Zoom and you've got your camera turned on, this works. Okay? I will see this because I can see you all if you got your cameras on. I will see this and I will call on you next. So if you can't find the digital raise your hand, don't sweat it. We are good. So Diana, oh, it's 2 clicks. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out how to get your camera, how to get your pit. There we go. There we go. There she is. Go ahead and ask your question for me.
Okay. For those of you that have been following, that I've been hooking a fairly, it's not a huge rug, but it's larger than I normally do. And it's got a batch of sheep, and I hook the sheep in my own hand spun wool. Okay. The top half is also hooked in wool strips. The bottom half is also hooked in wool strips. So my question to Cindy was, when I go to steam it, I don't want to steam my hand spun wool, that is yarn wool, that is on the sheet, because I don't want to smush them down. I want them to stay fluffy. But I know I can steam the top and the bottom. That piece is okay. Now, but once I get that steam, I was trying to figure out how I was going to check it to make sure it was square. Because where I normally do my steaming, this rug is too big. So I knew Cindy had done her floor size rug, and I knew she at some point had to square it. So
Right. Yeah.
that was my question.
The important thing, I think, what a lot of rug hookers get sort of overthinking on is that the steaming surface that you are using has to fit your rug. It doesn't. I steamed my room size rug on an ironing board. Now, what I will tell you is that I steamed the center part that is inside the scroll.
Right.
I steamed that years ago when I finished that part. I also check for holidays. It's a process I go through to end a rug. Ooh, tickle. So that was relatively easy. When it got to the point where now the rug is done and borders are in, 2.5 to 3 feet wide, how do you now steam this monster? So what I literally did, what was easier, was I put the ironing board completely down on the floor, lifted the edge of the rug and slid it under the rug. That made it easier. And I steamed that rug, slid the ironing board, steamed it again. Yeah, I'm down on the floor, my hands and knees. I have a wonderful mat that I bought years ago from, what's the tool company that, I forget what it's called. Starts with an H. There's a big tool, Husky maybe, or something like that.
Harbor Freight?
No, it wasn't the store. It was more the brand of the tool. That's going to drive me absolutely crazy. Husky. It is Husky. So there it is. So I use this for gardening when I go outside. It's really hard. No, it's not. It's firm. It's firm. So when I take this outside, it's big enough to go under my knees, and it's big enough for me to aim for. If you get those little skinny ones, you get down on your knees, and all of a sudden your knees on the ground and it's ugly. So I used this, and I kind of limped along, took breaks, and just steamed it that way. Remember, what's going on with the steaming process is that you are getting it warm and damp. The next step is more important. The next step is when you stop working, right? So you lay it on the floor in the position that you want it to be in for it to stay forever. It's like blocking a sweater. If you knit or crochet, whatever shape it's in, when it dries, it's going to stay in that shape, right? And so your rug is the same thing. That's why I always say after you steam it, it needs to sit there for a week. More time than you think it takes, right? If you touch it and it feels cold, it's still wet. That's the dampness you're feeling. So you need to make sure it's 100% dry before you roll it up. Otherwise, it's going to dry in the rolled up position and it's going to stay that way. It's going to be hard to get it flat again. You'll have to go through the steaming process again. Now, to make it square, you need to measure the diagonal. Now, Diana, I know you've got, because your sheep, I'm guessing, are pulled a little bit higher. She's nodding yes.
Right. Yep.
So what's going to happen is that you will need to sort of steam it. You can make the steam come out of the iron and get into the yarn without pressing it down. Okay. And I'm always asked, do you steam the front or the back? My answer is yes. I
Yes,
steam the front and I steam the back,
and
and
the
I'll
back.
steam the front of it again. I'll steam the back again. I don't stop until I'm like, yeah, that looks the way I want it to look. Now, as far as measuring, then the problem becomes is we've got that sheet barrier. But I think if you take a tape measure, or even if it's a smaller rug, you can take a yardstick and you can get a measurement and sort of estimate it kind of up in the air, and it'll
Okay.
be closer than not doing it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, and that's what part of this is what I use for my room size rug, I have a floor with tile that are 12 inches square. So I lined up one side along the edge, and then I looked at the other side. Once it was one side was lined up with the tile, I look at the rest of it and figure out, okay, this actually goes up on the tile, so I need to pull it down. And I'll just keep moving it and pulling on it until it fits nicely in the square tile of my floor. Now, if you're doing this on carpet, you don't have that advantage. But if you're doing this on carpet, you have an advantage in that you can actually pin the rug to the carpet. You can take T-pins and actually stick it through the carpet into the underlayment, and your rug will stay put. If you've got one that's maybe like hooked on the diagonal and it's going to be a little bit more work to get it square. But generally, most of the rugs will come out pretty square unless you've got something unusual going on, or you're using a really loose linen, or you're using monk's cloth. Those are the ones that are going to need a little bit more attention.
And that's it. This one's on linen. And so I knew I was going to have some stretching to do,
Right,
on it.
right.
So, okay. And I figured Sue's here too, that she steamed yarn. So I thought maybe Sue could give me some hints.
That's a good idea. Sue, do you have anything to share?
Well, I don't really worry about flattening it though. I'm looking for a uniform surface.
Right.
So I just steam it. I just do it just like I do with the fabric. And then
Okay.
measure it diagonally, across the rug diagonally to make sure the two diagonals are the same length and call it good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good point, because you don't the whole idea is not to push down on that iron and make it flat. The whole idea is to steam it to loosen up all the fibers, and then they end up laying into place just right.
Okay. Okay.
Cindy?
Thank you. I will work on that when I'm almost to that point. So
Oh, okay, good. Good. Did someone have a question? Did I
Cindy?
hear somebody? Yeah.
It's Kim. Kim Severance. Hi, from Idaho, everybody. I have laid mats out or rugs out on a cement patio and put beach towels, underneath. And then I've taken my floor steamer, and it's the mop one that you use on the linoleum, and I have steamed my bigger mats that way.
Oh.
And it puts out a lot of steam. Yeah, and then you can flip it over and do the other side.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter what the cement does.
Right. It
You know what I
really
mean?
it really
Go ahead.
becomes just a matter of what do you have available.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a good point, Kim. Thanks.
Mhm.
I'm going to lose my train of thought today a lot. I am going to probably start talking and forget. I've been suffering from migraines the last 2 days. So today was one of those days, and I've got my sunglasses right here. So as soon as this is over, sunglasses are going back on. So if I seem a little disjointed, that is what is going on. So bear with me. Okay, what other questions? I don't see any comments from YouTube. I don't see any written comments from you guys. Let me go to a gallery view so I can see you all. Anybody else got questions? Remember, this works.
I've got a comment type question and a question too, because I'm not a sewer, particularly other than just to sew around the edges of my rug. So when you say to you're looking from your salvage, you fold your salvages together. The first time I heard that, I'm like, okay, so what's the salvage?
Good point. Good point. I don't know if I have a wool. This wool is left over from the other day. Often a salvage. I can't see
Give
what
me,
I'm
Cindy.
looking at. So a salvage. Okay, I'm like confused on my cameras. Here we go. This one, this is a salvage. You can always tell it because it's usually like a bumpy edge. A lot of times it'll look completely different. I don't know if I can grab one offhand. Who's got a weird edge? This one's got some like white. No, it doesn't. I thought it did. I thought that one had white fibers in it. They're the edge of the fabric when it comes on the bolt. Most of these have all been ripped into. But there are some pretty salvages. There are some wools. They're usually the beigey one that what does this one have? We'll take a close look at this one and then I give up. Oh, and this one has the salvages ripped off. So I bet this one had a pretty salvage. A lot of times I'll rip them off because they're not, part of the usable part of the wool, except there are people who actually make whole rugs out of salvages. They're a little bit of a tighter weave. Sometimes they're, it's not a raw edge. Thanks, Pat. It's where the weave of the fabric where they go in and it turns around, it goes back the other way. It turns around, goes back the other way. So it kind of like seals up the edge.
It's a very tighter weave, Sue.
It's a tighter
and thicker. It's a little thicker, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, yes. And sometimes it can look completely different than the actual. Like this one kind of blends in, and it's the same kind of color. There are some where they're like striped and just different. They just look different. But that's the edge of the fabric, and it's what I call the long edge of the fabric. Okay, so think about it this. Oh, I moved that bolt. The bolt I had the other day. Think about that fabric. It's 58-ish inches wide. It's in a factory, and they're going to take the warp threads, and they're going to take the stronger threads, right? And they're gonna set it up however they do it. I'm sure it's not like a hand loom, but they'll set up those threads, and then they start doing the warp threads, which go sideways, right?
Weft.
The weft threads. Thank you. So they do those. Those are the ones that go sideways, and those are usually a lower quality thread because Terry Dorr pretty much glazed my eyes over one time. God bless him, but it was like, okay, I'm not sure I really needed to know that, but there's a lot when they buy the threads for fabric, okay? So the longer threads are the ones that are going to pull the fabric as it's getting woven. So they need to be strong, right? The ones that go side to side can be cheap little threads because they don't need to have the strength. So when we cut our strips, we want to cut our strips so that those long threads go through our strip. They're higher quality. Now, that said, the minute you get a wool that is a different color going a different way, I am pretty much open to cutting it against the salvage. This one is not quite perfect. it doesn't have the same striping going up and down as it does side to side. So there is a choice here as to what way do you cut it. So in this particular case, if you like this oranges and the reds, which I do, my favorite part of this particular wool, I'm going to cut it with the selvage, because here's the selvage. If I want that to kind of go away, I'm going to cut it more up and down, and it's going to look more like a brown wool when I cut it. So the rule is cut your strips in parallel to the selvage, unless you can get a different color option going the other way. So a lot of times that's what you're looking for, is that color option that is going in the opposite direction. Is it that big of a deal? No. But I also know, when in doubt, do it the strongest way, right? And that's kind of what something like, wherever that piece went, something like this, it doesn't matter which way I cut it, right? So I'm going to want to cut it the way that will go parallel to the selvage, and it's with the short end. And so I'm going to do it that way and fold it. That gives me 8/16 or a perfect half yard. And I can put this on the shelf, and then when someone comes over to shop, they can pull it out and go, okay, I need 3 of those. So they can pick out 3, rip it, and away you go. So it helps. I think I talked about this last week, or maybe sometime before that. I know it's in one of the videos I'm editing. You need to use a standard size piece of wool. Not because it's important that you use a standard piece. What's important is that you begin to develop a sense of how much a piece of wool will hook, right? Because that'll save you aggravation. And I showed, I think it was last week, where you can use your hand and put your hand on a pattern, and that's roughly 1/16 of a yard will hook the area of your hand. And you can just lay your hands down and kind of count and come up with a number. And if it's 16/16, then you need a yard. Then what you do is, what is your tolerance for running out of wool? Okay, because everybody's different. I see a lot of people smiling. If you are one of those people, you absolutely don't want to run out of wool, then you're probably going to buy 1.5 yards, particularly if you're buying it off a bolt and all you can buy are yards and half yards. You're going to get 1.5 yards. If you are getting something more like this and you figure you need 3 to hook it, do you want to go 4, right? Or 5 if you're really timid, right? Or if it's a really special wool and you would never find anything that would be anything close to that, then you're going to want to
buy the whole thing.
Say that again, Diana.
You buy the whole thing.
You buy the yeah, then you do that. Yeah. Because once you find something, like for instance, this was dyed and it's an accident. I will never be able to re-dye this color wool again, right? It's supposed to be window wool. It is way too blue to be window wool. So it will not be used in window wool. Once I figure out what value that is, I might do one more batch and do another retake on that to fill up my set. But there we go.
Well, as Kim has figured out with us, we like to buy her all of her mistakes.
Right. Yep.
We look for those salt dyed ones, the ones where she just took her dye spoons and rinsed them off and, used the salt to clean them off.
Right.
I love those too, Sue.
And that's going to depend on what you've been dyeing all along. Are you dyeing a lot of yellows and greens and oranges? It's going to look one color. If you are more like Kim's, hers tend to turn out more red, blue, or purple. So that has that kind of a overall look to it. But yeah, it's a great way to empty your salt jar without wasting that dye. But it's not so much about wasting the dye, it's about what that salt
Yeah.
or dye infused salt can do on the wool. That's the cool part.
Mhm.
Okay, Denise, you have raised your hand. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
I have a dye question.
Okay.
So I dyed some wool. It was warm. It was hot in the pot and it was in hot water, and I scrunched it all up and I wanted kind of a spot dye look.
Mhm.
So I took my dye and put it in hot water and added acid to the water. And it turned out, I think, relatively well,
Yeah, it did.
Mhm.
except
On the back.
the back.
Okay. So I'm gonna make some predictions then. Okay. I'm
Okay.
guessing that the pot that it was in might have been a little bit on the small side, or there was not enough water in the pot for the wool to move around freely.
That's correct.
Okay.
Crowded the pot and I had very little water in the pot.
So what you have to do with that is, if you want both sides to get the full impact of the dye, then is you literally have to pick it up, turn it over, and then do it again. Okay.
Okay.
If there's more water in the pot, what'll happen is you won't get the intense stops and starts like you got. It's going to be a softer look because the water will diffuse it. But it'll
Yes.
tend to be on both sides.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was wanting a, big contrast,
Okay.
which I got.
You did.
But
yeah.
okay. But just once it absorbs, turn it over and dye it again.
Turn it over, do the other side. Yeah. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to open a whole can of worms here, but I'm not seeing much in the question area. There is a right side and a wrong side to the wool. Now, if you're surprised to hear that and you've been with me for a while, it's because I don't care about that. So I don't teach that. Okay. There are people who teach that you have to hook on only with the right side of the wool facing up. Okay. And part of it is, it depends on what you're going for. If you want it to look like a machine-made commercial rug, then you make sure that the right side is always up, right? That's what they were trying to do back in the 60s. They were trying to duplicate the look of an Oriental by hooking. And so small cuts, hooked in straight rows, perfect dyeing, no modeling, because there was no modeling in the commercial versions. And that's what they were trying to duplicate. We're not trying to do that anymore. So that piece of wool that you dyed, I would hook it on. I would cut it and just grab and hook it with whatever side came up. Okay, the only time it could be an issue is if it's so obvious that it's different. You might see that, it could look stripy or whatever, but usually you cannot detect that difference. Okay, so I am sipping on my Pepsi from Taco Bell. First of all, the caffeine helps with the migraine. But today is April, so that was my April run to Taco Bell because my husband limits me to once a month. So, what other questions do you have? Oh, we are going to decline that. It came up as potential spam, so I'm going to trust Apple on that, and I'm not even going to call that number back. So if you ever call me and I don't call you back, call me again. And if I knew where my phone is, here it is, I'm going to turn my phone off so that doesn't happen again. What else can I help you with?
Is there a way to tell selvage if you don't have the selvage? And I mean, when you're cutting wool where you don't have the selvage, something to be aware of?
How do you tell? Why do I have such a tickle? Excuse me. Part of it can be based on the size of the wool. But then you have to trust that the person who sold it to you cuts their wool into standard sizes. I cut all my wool into 1 yard lengths. And when it gets shipped to you, it has a selvage on it. If you order half a yard, I fold the selvages together, snip it at the fold, and you get one selvage on one side. The other person gets the other selvage. If you order something smaller, at least if it's for me, it's going to be snipped at the top like that. So you're going to know exactly how to rip it. Now, I do this ripping thing. I do the ripping thing whenever I take it out of the dryer as I'm getting ready to fold it. I don't snip it before I put it in the washer. Part of that tells me back in the day, what was it, like 2005, 2007, 8, somewhere around in there, the wools we were getting were crap. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. They called it British wool. It was very loosely woven. It did not felt up easily. I had to wash it multiple times. I've always had, during my rug hooking career, I've always had a front loader, right? Mainly because I want that countertop. So I went to a front loader because of that. Plus it saves a little bit in water, but it doesn't agitate quite the same way. So you got to wash your wool with blue jeans, get that agitation going, right? And then wash it, dry it. If I take it out of the dryer and it is not washed the way, it doesn't feel right, it's not ready for rug hooking, I will then put it back in the washer. I'll usually do just the snip at the fold because it's like, oh, it's not ready, so I'm not going to do all the snips. I'm just going to snip it at the fold. I'll put it in the washer. I'll wash it again. I'll dry it. I'll take it out. Oh, it's still not ready. I might do 1/2 of it, put it back in the washer, put it in the dryer. I found that during those years, I had to wash my wool 5 times to get it felted up to the point where I wanted to hook with it. Okay, so nothing goes on this shelf unless it's something that I'm willing to hook with, right? So it took a lot of washing to get to that point. Luckily, they changed the way the commercial wools are woven for us in rug hooking, got away from whatever that thing was and moved into, a much more of like a mat where you almost can't see the threads. It's more finely woven and it felts up really nice. That's the wool I like to hook with.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm going to wash it multiple times, and I'll use those snips to kind of go, okay, I've washed it once, snip part way, I've washed it twice, snip it the rest of the way, pull it out, and that's how I detected that it was 5 times before a lot of those wools were ready for the shelf.
I understand that it doesn't really matter right side, wrong side, but just for curiosity, how do you tell the right side from the wrong side?
And I am going to have to defer that. I would recommend that you go on Wednesday to Kim's Hookin'. She will tell you. Because she worries about the right side and the wrong side. I don't. So I never remember which is which. Does anybody else remember which is which?
Yeah, I think that the wrong side is the one where it looks like an even weave, where it looks a little fuzzier, and the right side looks like a twill and it's smoother.
Okay, thank you.
That's my good guess.
Right. I just know that I don't have the eyesight for that, you know, and it's one of those things, it doesn't matter to me. You know, I like if I get one, you know, that is, you know, maybe dyed, um, you know, like the one we saw where it's lighter on the back than it is on the front. I don't care. You know, I will use those strips. Okay, I want a light area here, so I'll just use that for the light area.
Mhm.
It,
And I'll
it
go through.
shows up more when it is an absolute solid color. Then you can tell.
Right.
And that's why Kim dyes her solid colored, you know, swatches. So yes, you can tell when you're hooking a 3-cut and you get the wrong side.
Right.
And they're done at once, don't like to do it.
Right. So a lot of that, I guess what I gather from that is that it depends on your style of hooking. I much prefer a texture over a solid. I use very little solids in my hooking nowadays. If I can get a texture, I'm going to use that instead. That's going to be my preference. A solid is only when I can't find a texture to do what I want. Then I'll use the solid. Where Kim tends to hook more with solids, so she sees it. And she's got better eyesight than I do.
And she always puts it right side up. So like if you get like those swatches that are all in a bundle, you know, hooked together, the side that the label you can read is the side that's the right side.
Correct.
And you cannot count on that for mine. Because they're just going to be there.
Yep.
In the right order.
And you can't count on that with anybody else's either. Always.
Right.
No.
Right.
And I like using them as they come up. I like using them like you said, Cindy, that sometimes the color on the other side is great for something.
Right.
You know? And sometimes there's two-toned wools too.
Right. Where it's on purpose, one side is different than the other side. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oops, wrong camera. Okay, what other? Still nothing in the chat. Remember, I realize those of you on YouTube, you can't talk to me, but if you've got a question, because I'm going to be turning off YouTube pretty quickly. So if you've got a question, make sure you get it into the comments, and then I will finish answering questions with my members inside the Zoom group. Okay. I am not seeing any questions coming in. So I am going to go ahead. Those of you here on Zoom, please stay. But I'm going to say goodbye to YouTube. Thanks for being here. Stay tuned on pulling up my calendar as we talk. The second Saturday of the month, which is April 12th, at 2:00 will be a beginner lesson, and that will be broadcast on YouTube. If you're a member of the Rug Cooking Journey, you can join me live on Zoom. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to YouTube and see you later.